Gerritt, and I am about to lead the virtual version of the Gerritt Tour for pediatric residents. We're standing here in front of the hospital, and this is where we start the tour. We're going to head south on Eddy Street. Here we are at the main corner by all of the hospitals, women and infants, children's, Rhode Island Hospital. It's a pretty busy intersection, lots of buildings. If you turn around, you start to look at what used to be the port area. It's still a port. You can actually see the water there. That's the upper end of Narragansett Bay. You've got I-195 pulling in there. Then you head over here and you look at this old industrial building about a block away. There used to be a lot of these in the area. The whole area was full of them. Now, not so much. Things look like that, the hospital. Looking the other way, there's other buildings, parking lots. There never used to be parking lots. All these places that are parking lots used to be a combination of housing and industrial buildings. A little further up the road, you can see the kind of houses the place used to be filled with. You know, triple deckers, working people's houses. Now you got restaurants and parking lots and medical buildings. But people used to live here in large numbers, and they got moved out. Looking towards the Providence River and I-95, all these parking lots used to be buildings. But you can see the water there, and that used to be the port. That for many years was a great port. It wasn't the original port, but it was a great port for people coming in from Europe, great port from people shipping all kinds of stuff out. And here's another example of an old industrial facility that's just no longer there. You know, space available. That one actually isn't that old, but you know, those companies are gone. That company's gone to Warwick for a single floor building. Of course, some of that industrial legacy, industrials like these guys where they worked with metals, there's lots of chemicals in the neighborhood and lots of dust and lead and all kinds of things. Who knows? The next generation of industrial buildings has been turned into things like this and childcare centers. If we turn around on the other side of the road, you know, modern commercial buildings, a few, you know, for more recent generation commercial industrial buildings, but nothing to write home about. And nothing that really is associated with true community prosperity. A little further on, we're confronted with an old garage, which reminds us of how much of the lead in that neighborhood comes from when they used to break apart lead batteries. Obviously, there's lead everywhere. And this area is one of the epicenters of Rhode Island's lead epidemic. We're at the corner of Sales and Eddy. Residential neighborhood up here. This side, some low-rise commercial buildings. So there is still some commerce around here, though a lot of it doesn't look like it's very active. Industrial automation, auto body and marine equipment. We're looking at the wind turbines over at the sewage treatment plant. They're not running today, not much wind, but could be maintenance issues too. Anyways, we're still going down Eddy Street. We're going west on Oxford Street now from Eddy going towards Broad. All we got is a check cash in place, roof and side and windows, and not much else. We're at the corner of Cahill and Oxford. You know, it's a real neighborhood. You know, we've moved off of the industrial, and you can see how close the houses were to the industrial, because Eddy Street's only a block away, and it would have been lined with industrial buildings. People lived right here. Who knows what that toxic legacy is like. Standing across from the Boys and Girls Club. They do have a community garden, though it doesn't seem like it's being used this year. Social service agencies are having a hard time. Kind of hard to do things when you're doing social distancing. But this is a real asset to the community when it's running. It looks like it's not completely closed. So we'll keep on moving. Still looking at community assets. We're over at the Mary Fogarty Elementary School. Do have a nicely new refurbished basketball court too. We're still walking along Oxford Street, and here we are in front of Goodwin Bradley. It's been manufacturing right in this spot for over 100 years. Of course, it is right next to a whole series of houses. It is right next to a school. They supposedly make patterns, but you walk by, and you can look inside, and there's an awful lot of machinery. Standing in front of St. Michael's Church, right behind the sign of Sister Anne Keefe Way. Sister Anne was a liberation theologist, one of many that used this church way back. She was a really wonderful person. This church has always been a magnet for immigrants, and it continues to be so. Asian, Hispanic. It is really a place that has done wonders for the community, though liberation theology seems to have fallen out with the church these days. The other side is a whole series of housing. This is Section 8, public housing, Providence Housing Authority. They've rebuilt a whole bunch of the smaller units, and the big building is still there. I used to know some people living here, but I think they've passed on. Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence. This is a street worker program, so when they come to the hospital where there's a shooting, these are the guys that come to try to make sure that the shooting doesn't become an epidemic of shooting. Standing at the corner of Broad and Oxford, America's Food Basket is the only semi-comprehensive grocery store in all of this neighborhood. It serves a large area of the south side that has essentially no food. It's what they call a food swamp. It's got lots of fast food, very little good food. One of the assets of Broad Street is the R line. Best bus line in the city. Runs every 10 minutes, 18 hours a day. City Arts is a program to bring up to kids who live in this neighborhood. This neighborhood is the center of the Dominican diaspora in Providence. Broad Street is very much a Spanish-speaking neighborhood. The African-American community is still here, but there are more and more Dominicans and other people of Hispanic descent here. The CVS is relatively new, maybe 10 years old. It's a sign of Obamacare, and that almost every kid in this neighborhood now has health insurance, and when you have everybody having health insurance, you need a pharmacy to serve them. And so CVS brought one in here. You can see it's been a while. It's starting to get a little shabby, but this is actually a relatively hopping district. It's early in the morning, but evenings there's a lot of restaurants, there's bars, there's car repair, laundromats, pretty much everything you need in the city, except, and you're close to the comprehensive grocery store here. We're heading on to Thurbers Ave from Broad Street, leaving the commercial district, heading back towards something that more resembles industrial, though actually formerly represented industrial. We're next to Weiss Street, and I don't know if I can read it or not. It says Weiss Street, Lower South Providence. Providence is divided up into 25 neighborhoods. Broad Street is the dividing line between Upper and Lower South Providence and Elmwood. Elmwood to the west, Upper and Lower South Providence to the east. You can see we're next to a big industrial building. I'm not sure there's anything in this building anymore. There used to be, I know, because I was in it, but it's been a long time, and most of that was stuff that was in the trash industry rather than manufacturing. Roger Williams Middle School, a middle school that is almost all children of color, relatively low-income neighborhood, surrounded by industrial, but actually nowadays mostly surrounded by an educational campus. From here you can see the rest of the educational campus. You've got an elementary school down there, and over here you've got a series of buildings, and they're all small high schools. Providence for a while got really into the small high school movement. Somebody here said, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm not sure it is. Nobody is. But we have a bunch of schools. They focus on different things. Kids go from there to, all kinds of places. But we just have lots of high schools and lots of kids still failing. This is new since last year. It's the food truck plaza. 3 food trucks parked around a little porch. Never seen anything quite like it, but it's an innovation. Easier to buy an old RV, turn it into a food truck, than to build a bricks and mortar building. Corner of Thurbers and Eddy, across from the Meeting Street School. But what we are here is the College Crusade and a bunch of other social service agencies in a building that was formerly industrial. So we've now got a whole non-profit service agency building when we used to have industrial. Makes a huge difference in your economy. We're on Thurbers Ave, right where it crosses I-95. And I've never walked this stretch this way, and they give you a crosswalk in an extremely dangerous place. There's a light up there that would get you into the center aisle. They could walk you down the center aisle with a sidewalk, but they send you around, and then they give you right on the damn curve. They give you a crosswalk, so there's no visibility, and people are coming off the highway entrance really fast. It's ridiculous. We're coming down to the port. Of course, you got lots of scrap metal going out, because that's what it is. It's a scrap metal port. But you also have the sex industry down here. High transmission of STDs, some of the highest in the world, in New England around here. But what you really want to think about is how the sex industry and the waterfront industries have been connected for at least 8,000 years. Corner of Thurbers and Allen's, right on the waterfront. You've got the big tanks, because we are, one of the biggest things we import through here is fossil fuels. In fact, it's become a major issue around here, is they keep putting all the fossil fuels here. And this neighborhood, the neighborhoods close to the port, have the highest asthma rates in the state. Of course, being right under the footprint of I-95 doesn't help, but this is a major, major oil port. It serves all of southern New England. It also has salt, and that gives you a lot of dust. And then you've got the sex industry, and then you've got all these scrap yards where they export the scrap. This one, this cash for scrap place, that's been fined and fined and fined, and they just keep ignoring the state. The state won't close them down because there's too much money involved. In addition to having scrap yards, sex industry, there's a little bit of healthcare industry, but there's an awful lot of abandoned property. This place used to be humming, but it's all gone with the industry. There used to be trains running down Allen's Avenue. They've paved them over. You can still see the track, but they haven't had a train running here in a long time. Down a little further south from here, they do actually run across the street to go from the port to the inland railroads, but this place ain't nothing anymore except a junkyard. So of course what they want to do is put more junk here rather than figuring out what they could do here that would actually be useful for the community. And we don't mean high-end content. That is a pile of used up asphalt. Prime waterfront land, and all they do is dump stuff on it. It's kind of like they have no imagination and no idea of how we're going to revitalize this community. And so every one of their ideas is, how do we make rich people richer rather than making it something that works for the entire neighborhood, for the entire community, for the entire city. But they can't figure that out at all. No ships today, but big piles of scrap metal, big machinery. This is the newest one of the places. It used to be a boatyard. They used to fix boats here, but the guy sold it, and the only thing that wanted it was a scrap yard. They ship all the scrap metal to China instead of us making stuff here with it. Yeah. Sex and scrap. Sounds like about the Providence economy. The wild zebra of Gentlemen's Club. Yeah, like bullshit. Mr. Conley owns this. He kept thinking he'd build condos, do something fancy. Ends up with a salt depot, about the lowest value you could have. Happens we need the salt in the winter. It makes the roads passable. But, you know, there are better places to put salt than a place right, you know, on the entrance to the city. But we just don't have the vision for it. He had a building over there, thought it was going to turn out to be something real cool, but nobody stayed because he didn't do all the other things he thought, because nobody thought that he was an honest broker. This area is also the home of the State Pier, which is where almost all of the immigrants coming from Southern Europe landed. This was a great port for people coming from Italy, from Greece, from Portugal, from the Cape Verde Islands. This is a great immigration port. You know, Providence has always been a melting pot. That's what happens when you're a seafront, you know, a port city. But nowadays, we don't have anything coming in other than scrap metal going out, salt and oil coming in. We got Sprague Energy. Sprague is one of the big energy companies in the world. Big terminal here. People fill up to get heat and oil and all the rest of that stuff. It happens, though, that we're standing right next to I-95, and the hospital is on just the other side of this interstate right here. And if they ever have an explosion here, it could hurt the hospital. And then, how do you deal with all the craziness when your hospitals, three of your major hospitals in the state are right across the highway from a highly explosive facility? It doesn't make sense. Sounds like Beirut. Oil tanks, power plant. Place it's been abandoned for years. They cleared it a few years ago, put the gravel in. It's still sitting there. Maybe they'll build something someday. More abandoned buildings. None of this stuff is really good for you. Oh yeah, one more strip club. We're approaching Davol Square. From here we'll head to the east side. Industrial, and now what they call the knowledge district. It used to be the jewelry district where they made jewelry. Now it's the knowledge district where they spread disinformation.